And we're going to talk about Valve's rules. Valve have delivered a bombshell to the scene by announcing their new rulebook for hosting licensed events from 2025 onwards. And when I got this leaked to me, I didn't believe some of the rules. Again, this is also some of the things that have been sent to me seem so fantastical that you almost recoil and go, I'm going to have to spend days checking on this because it's so weird. I can't even necessarily take it at face value. And this Valve rulebook has some, like, crazy shit in. I mean, stuff that has insane seismic impact on the CS2 scene. So I'm very surprised more people aren't talking about it and its implications. So let's get into it. This is the HLTV summary, and you can see Valve has released a tournament operating requirements rulebook, a set of rules and regulations for how tournament organizers can receive a license for hosting events in CS2 from 2025. This uncovers new details on Valve's previously announced plan to impose restrictions on invitations to large-scale events in order to combat franchising, which had become widespread in ESL and Blast events in recent years. Now remember, we've got Blast carving out a new circuit, we've got ESL carving out a new circuit, we've got the Esports World Cup, which there's a little weird tangentially linked story in this. James Fudge, who is hands down Esports Journalist of the Year, as I said on the Four Horsemen a few days ago, it's not even close. Nobody's doing the caliber of work he's doing in esports this year. He's had some huge leaks and huge reveals, and it's all high quality. So absolutely, if he doesn't get the award, which I'm sure he'll turn down because it's from Riyadh, it's a travesty. But he did a reveal where if you sign up to the Esports World Cup Kadia thing that they're doing, it's a rule you cannot participate in any other programs similar to their, stipend thing. So what's interesting is, obviously, Blast have put something in about, well, if you don't turn up to these events, then you lose all your money that we were going to give you, all your bonuses. So there's this weird combative stuff going on right now, which is what I said should have happened in the first place. You can't have, if you want to get the bag, you have to commit to one bag. You can't have all of the bag all of the time, every bag. Whoever's got bags, I'm there, open the bag. And so now people are going to have to choose. They're going to have to choose which tournaments they prioritize, I imagine. And so Valve's rules come at a time when there's already all this like squabbling and elbowing and all this stuff going on. But some of this now will also create huge ramifications for Tier 2. And so let's look at the first part. There's now a distinction between ranked and unranked events. And so obviously this was going to happen because if you want to earn points for the regional standings, it has to be sanctioned by Valve. It has to be a ranked event. Then there will be unranked events, and they won't contribute at all. So far, so normal. But ranked events have to comply with strict rules about who can and can't be there. So in other words, what we know is you have to use Valve's ranking for invites. You must first offer invitations to the rankings as appropriate, and you cannot deviate from that until teams have turned you down. So, okay, but an unranked event cannot have a prize pool of above $100,000. And I wondered how Valve were going to handle this, because if you remember, I said the one thing they need to get on top of is how are they going to handle all of these stupid betting site cups with huge tournament money, huge prize pools. And they really need to shut them down because they're bullshit, and there's all conflict in, now, if you're a team that can sort of play in a better caliber of tournament and get your rankings up, you better be doing that, because you can't earn $250,000 anymore playing in one of those fucked up shit online cups. So it also says, this is another crazy thing, the compensation for all events hosted by the licensee within a year cannot exceed $250,000. And that's, again, just for the unranked event. So if you run unranked events and you're a licensee, you can't go above $250,000 in a year. That's that. So you can't even commit to 3 tournaments for $100,000 each. Nope. Your last one has to be 50. Otherwise, we're not going to let you use the game. So, yep, a lot of organizations are going to be affected by this. I'm thinking of Bet Boom and people like that, right? So, in other words, you're going to have to level up your game. You can't just have your weird little fucking tournaments where you invite whoever you want, i.e. teams you own or sponsor, to play in these huge money tournaments anymore. And you will not be earning ranking points from them. So that's how they've tackled that problem. You can see HLTV rightly observe that most organizers of lower tier online tournaments currently exceed that yearly amount, which means that if they chose similar budgets for the following year, they will have to apply for ranked licenses from 2025 and adhere to all of Valve's rules. So there you go. Finally, Valve did something with the license. Now, I also want to add, Valve could do something hilarious, which they won't, but I know you're listening, Valve, so do give this some consideration. How about you, in 2025, say that the Esports World Cup isn't a ranked event? You say it's an unranked event. You refuse to give it points, and then you cap the prize pool of the life-changing money to $100,000 or pull the license. You can do something so funny right now that would make my life. I've never asked for anything from Valve, but that would be the gift. That would be the gift that I don't deserve. So, just saying, just give it some thought, okay? That would be cinema. That would be an absolute cinema, as Kai would say. It would just be so good to have, all these insane, like, 60 million for life-changing money, $100,000 for an unranked CS tournament. I mean, the format's dog shit, so I'm just putting that out there, okay? Anyway, in fact, actually, because I am an esports expert, I'll give you some thoughts on this. There are good and bad things with this. It definitely limits the rewards for being a tier 2 player. There are some players, I know you might find this amazing after having followed Hooksy's career, but there are some players that will just never get airlifted into tier 1. It will never happen for them. They are never going to be good enough. And they have to eke out a weird existence of the expectation that's put on them is still that they're a pro. They still have to train. They still have to practice. They still have to grind. They still have to improve. And a tier 2 player puts in the same amount of time, if not more in some cases, than a tier 1 player. And yet they might never improve. They might never get the opportunities. So a highlight for a tier 2 player might be playing in something like a CCT. Think about Ultimate, who's just joining Team Liquid. That's been the entirety of his career. I imagine he's still done relatively well out of it from a prize money perspective. This now does hamper that possibility. And when you start pulling at the fucking Jenga bricks of the ecosystem, sometimes if you limit what happens at the lower levels in terms of money, the whole thing can come tumbling down because less people commit to being professional, so you have less of a talent pool, people get disenfranchised, people get bored, and eventually you have less players to work with. One team will dominate, people get bored, people stop watching, and then you have this cascading domino effect of all of this issue. It also unfortunately can lead to more corruption, because if people earn less in the tier 2, suddenly the prospect of match fixing in tier 2, which is already happening in abundance in Counter-Strike, the prospect seems more tempting. After all, if there's a limit on how much I can earn each year because prize pools take a hit, then I'm going to have to fix on the side. So it's one of those considerations that will come with downsides. What are the upsides? The upsides are this. If people want to run big, prestigious tournaments with big prize pools and have their sponsors, being viewed and all of this other stuff, then you are going to have to get involved with Valve. No more is this some sort of loose arrangement where Valve have been very generous with their licenses and their APIs historically. I'd say to a fault. I'd say they should have clamped down on who can use their intellectual property the minute the skins casinos went out of fucking control. They should have had a long, hard look in the mirror and thought to themselves, you know what? Not everyone is fit to have our stuff, and use our APIs and use our intellectual property. Well, let's revise our laissez-faire approach. Well, here we are. This is a way to essentially corral people into cooperation with what Valve wants. And they're never going to be the hands-on developer that Riot are, but this is actually a step towards more influence and more control. And I've got to say, I think it's a good thing. I think a lot of these tournaments, there's no integrity measures at them. We've got a conflict of interest everywhere at all of them. Bet Boom playing at the Bet Boom Cup. I'm pretty sure I saw one tournament where it was like the sponsor team played the academy team, also sponsored by the same sponsor, at a tournament sponsored by the sponsor. It's like, this is mental, guys. This is so far from where we need to be from an integrity standpoint. And so now Valve are going to put, they're going to put you in a room where you have to agree with Valve if you want to have the big tournaments and the prestige. And that also will have the positive of no more are we going to see these chancer organizations rocking up for sticker money because they don't make a positive contribution to the scene. These are the orgs that finesse players, sign them up for contracts and then cut them 2 months later because they didn't qualify for the major and it's not worth paying you anymore. We were never serious anyway. We don't need more orgs like that in the ecosystem. I shed no tears about the orgs leaving, saying, we can't make money now. The sticker thing's a problem. No, it's fine, actually. Stay all the way fucked off. What this does now is if you're an org and your team plays all year round, attends ranked tournaments, the success will perpetuate. The success will sustain itself. Why? Because you will get invited to the next one and the next one, and you're contractually obliged to be invited to the next one. So success begets more success. You might say, you might get tired of all this winning, right? So there are pros and cons with this decision, and in general, I lean more to the pros. We will see. Next, Tier 1 and Tier 2 and invite limitations. Another new distinction made in the rulebook are Tier 1 and Tier 2 events. Valve has finally drafted up their own criteria for what constitutes a Tier 1 and a Tier 2 event. This is like historic. They've never, ever addressed this. I mean, they don't address much, do they? But you can see Tier 1 events will be required to invite teams, starting from the team ranked first, feature at least 16 teams across the closed qualifier and main event portion, and feed at least 8 qualified teams into the main event. Tier 2 events can, if they choose to feature direct invitations from the VRS, only invite teams ranked 9th or lower. Both can, but are not required to, be supplemented by open qualifiers. So, breaking all of that down, right, what have we got? Well, first of all, if you want to be called a Tier 1 event, you got to have Tier 1 teams there. This will stop like what we had with that fucking tournament Mongols won, and everyone's going, wow, man, they won like an S-tier tournament. There was no one there. There was no one there. There was Astralis there, which, again, there was no one there. See above. So, I like this. The commitment to having to invite the best teams, and only invite, they can decline. Remember, there's going to be declines, because there are financial incentives to not go to competing events. So You're only obliged to invite, and then we just go down the ranking. And so every tournament now, you want to call yourself a Tier 1 tournament, you better have the Tier 1 teams there. No more masquerading, no more LARPing, right? Like, up until the most recent Dallas, for example. Dallas historically just had shit teams there, and it was considered a bit of a joke of an event. Yet there it was, Intel Extreme Masters. You know, it's got all the pageantry of a big event, but it wasn't one really, and everybody knew it up until this year. So yeah, local heroes. Shout out to local heroes. Now, if you're a Tier 2 event, well, yeah, you just invite the 9th or lower. There you go. So the top 8 teams largely dictate what is Tier 1 and what isn't. More incentive to be in those top 8 teams. So yeah, fine. Not a problem with this. It's rigid, it's inflexible, but maybe necessary for the purposes of delineation, which is fine. Then also, you can have open qualifiers. They're saying you can supplement your events with open qualifiers if you want to. Now, whether or not anyone will ever choose to do this, who knows? I mean, open qualifiers are generally a nightmare. But I want all of the people that were going, the romance of CS is dead. Shitters can't fluke their way to World Championship and then bomb out in the first round. The romance. 5 friends will never... Shut the fuck up. You can have all that now. Right? You can still have it. And by the way, we should never have agreed that should be the norm for elite level esports. We water down our own product. It's pathetic. So, but there you are. You still get your open qualifiers. So now, don't cry at Valve. Cry at the tournament organizers. Spoiler, you won't. Then it goes on. Some of the biggest limitations on ranked events include being required to invite 1.5 times the number of teams who will compete in the main event via the regional standings. Half of the teams competing in the main event can be invited directly, while the rest has to go through a closed qualifier. So this is, again, we've now got these closed qualifiers. People have to hash it out there, and it adds, however, a closed qualifier can simply mean one of the stages of the same tournament, as shown in the example below. And in the example, they say, under these rules, IM, Cologne, or Katowice can retain their current format, inviting the top 8 ranked teams straight to the main event, and the remaining 16 to the play-ins, because the play-in technically counts as a closed qualifier. So this is great. All of these tournaments, by the way, that have these play-ins and these like opening stages and all of this stuff where they essentially separate the wheat from the chaff, and it's just an extra week of content for them that no one really cares about because the big boys aren't in the tournament. Well, that's now your closed qualifier if you want it to be. So you meet the criteria that Valve have set, and your formats realistically don't change. You can still have that if you want. So, fair enough. Then, while most invites for ranked events have to be made according to the Valve regional standings, Valve also allows 2 wildcard invites for every 8 teams competing in the main event. Hold on, boys. Is romance back on the menu? Let's see. Not on Hooksy's Instagram, apparently, but whatever. The wildcard teams, however, have to feature at least 3 players who at one point in the past 12 months were a member of a top 8 roster on the VRS, that's the Valve ranked system, or have won standings rather, or have won a tier 1 event in the past 12 months. These can also not be invited directly to the main event. So here you go. Your wild cards are there now for not to just have some shitters, but what if a core of a team is good, right? And then they lose 2 players, or, you know, they lose their org, and then they get 2 more players, and, oh, well, you know, we don't really know what to do with them from a ranking perspective, but that team was good. The core of that team was good. Just invite them straight. We can just invite them to a tournament now. It's fine. Got a wild card for them. Don't need to worry, no fuss, no muss. There were loads of people that were all worried about it, like saying, oh, this new system, the Valve ranking system, it's really going to make it hard for the have-nots. Listen, Valve have always maintained this idea that if you go and like have a team and attain success, there should be an environment where you can continue to just do that. They're also, by the way, remember, they don't like the orgs. They've never liked the orgs. And so this is a world where you as players, this is the unspoken thing. You as players, as long as you are 5 players doing well in the rankings, you can theoretically not be at an org, by the way, and get invited to every Valve tournament. Now, you won't do that because players love a salary, right? But if for any reason 3 people got cut from a roster and didn't have a job, couldn't get into a new org, they could get 2 other players and still be invited to the Valve tournaments. It would still be there. So, you know, you gotta fuck with it. Also, if you fluke a tier 1 tournament win somehow, then and you've done it in 12 months, you can be invited back as a wild card to any tournament after that for up to 12 months. So that's good as well, right? So I like all of that. Then wild card events. Tournament organizers are allowed to host 1 wildcard event for every 3 tier 1 events completed. So if you run 3 tier 1 events, your next one can have some wildcard homies in it, right? And they are unlimited wildcard invites. So in other words, you do 3 tier 1 events at Valve's behest under Valve's rules. Then for your 4th event, if you want, you can just have you can invite all these wildcard teams that maybe didn't get a chance if you want to. You don't have to, it's not obliged, but if you want to, you can do it. Then, this is the other thing, the rulebook also details requirements on announcement dates for tournaments and additional information such as the location, qualifiers, prize pool, and more. For example, all Tier 1 events held in 2026 must be announced by January 1st, 2025, almost 2 years in advance. Now, this has upset a lot of people, but there's a method to the madness. The chat's resisting. What if I was to tell you I fuck with this? Big time. Bigly. Let me explain why. The biggest cause of consternation for tournament operators is the calendar. The calendar is a fucking disaster, and it is a disaster for everyone in the ecosystem. Let me explain. Here's how it works. Okay. There is a thing called a year, and a year is made up of months, and the months are made up of weeks, and the weeks are made up of weekends, days. And what people do is they go, I think it would be convenient for my business to run an event there. And they pop it down, right? And they're a business, and they're an independent business, and they don't need to tell anyone about it. And so they set about the logistics of having an event in that place on those days. And they don't talk to anyone about it. And then about 3 months, if you're lucky, before it's ready, they will say, right, we're having an event there. We're going to have an event in Berlin on the 14th, and boop, that's where it's going to be. And then they go, right, so see you all there, teams that we have a pre-existing business agreement with? And they go, yeah, of course we'll be there. We have a pre-existing business agreement with you. We're contractually obliged to attend, no matter how inconvenient or weird it is. And then they ring up the broadcast talent, and they go, and 3 months is a fucking pipe dream. And they go, can you be there? And you go, oh, well, I've got a life and everything, and it'd be nice to, have a work-life balance. But if you say no to one event, tournament operators are petty little bitches, and they don't invite you back to the next one. So, of course, I'm going to be there. I'll just cancel out. I can't go to that wedding. I can't go to that funeral. I can't go to that christening. I miss my own birthday, but yeah, I'll be there, fine. Right? And that's how it operates, because nobody gets any notice. Now, you end up also, at this time, another business tournament operator comes along, and they look at that calendar too. And maybe they want to run an event the week after. And now suddenly, I've got to go from, as a player or a member of talent, I have to go from there to there, and I didn't even know about that. So now I've got to logistically think about how am I getting from here to here, and that means I'm going to be away from home. And in fact, actually, there's another event, and another event, and another event, and they're all in a similar area. So it's just cheaper for me to stay out here. Well, sorry, wife, sorry, husband, sorry, kids, sorry, parents, sorry, elderly relative that I look after on weekends, sorry, partners, sorry, friends. I'm just in Europe for a month now. I'm just in America for a month now. Sorry, pets. Yeah, whatever it might be, right? Because unbeknownst to me, we've now had a run of events all in the same space, and I've now got 3 months to kind of plan it all out, and it turns out I'm just out there now. Sorry. You cannot make plans in this industry because this industry never thinks more than 3 months in advance. And so then the other aspect of this, the calendar is one big fight. The calendar wars are the unspoken wars of esports because everyone wants the prime real estate of the calendars. And we know historically who gets it. ESL and people who suck ESL's dick. If you're willing to be an ally to ESL and, you know, basically give them everything they want, they'll give you some scraps off the table. And so 2 events never run at the same time, but they've tried to. 2 events always might want to occupy the same space, but ESL just get to do it. They always get their way. So what ends up happening is the calendar is this weird, like, sequential 3-month rolling battle where nobody knows what's going on in any ability to pre-plan. It's inconvenient for everyone. And the calendar is kind of like, it's almost like an exquisite corpse, if you know that game, where it's like there's no cohesion. It's only very recently that, like, say with something like the IEM Tour, that you have set dates or set places. We're always going to be in Cologne. We're always going to be in Katowice. We're always going to be in Dallas. And we're going to roughly put it around here. But it's still not exact. Now, I ask you, what's one of the first things that a successfully functioning sport sort of has to have? And it's a fucking calendar. Like, you plan it out in advance. Every game, every fixture, date, time, location. It's all there. It's all done. You get told that months in advance. And that's for the fans. That's obviously, these things have to be prepped. And we just never have done that in esports. We've never done it. And it's led to all of this, like, horrible shit. Like, your favorite broadcast talent, by the way, just, they don't know what is going on in their own lives. Like, your favorite broadcast talent are put into impossible positions because of the way the system works right now, which is like literally, hey, there's a big event on now. Do you want to work it? Well, it's like 2 weeks notice. Yeah, well, but I've like booked a fucking holiday with a girlfriend. Well, no, you got to come. It's the big event. Sorry. Caught us by surprise too. And so you don't fucking get to have any sort of planning. It's the same for the orgs and the teams that they enter to a lesser extent. You know you're going to have these contractual obligations that you've got to hit. You're obliged to enter a team. This is why we went through the stand-in era, if you remember. That was great, wasn't it? Remember when every tournament had one team with either a visa issue, because we keep hosting events in America, or a stand-in. And it was because somebody wanted some time off or they were burnt out. There was an event every weekend. So we just used a stand-in because all that mattered was meeting your contractual obligations. Well, now we don't have to do any of that. We've got fucking... There it is. This will be the calendar because the deadline is the 1st of January in 2025. I want to know all the events that you're running. And so while I get it seems insane based on how we've traditionally done things in esports, and everyone's going, 2 years to plan. No, that is how a functional sports industry looks like, by the way, guys. It's only us that do this wrong. It's only us in esports that do this fucked up, last minute. It's, what we're doing at the moment is the anathema. That's the aberration. So a lot of people have took exception to this, and not me. I'm not one of them. I like to look at a calendar a year in advance and go, wow, okay, I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. That is a luxury I will never have had in any part of my life in esports. E-League was probably the only time, because it's like, here we go. This is the season. So we have a weekly show every week for 10 weeks. And then you go, oh, wow, this is great. I know my working hours. I know where I'm going to be. I know when I have to be on. I can plan around. I can go and visit people. I can travel. So it's a good thing, guys. It's a good thing. TOs are going to fucking hate this, but it's also going to wrestle back a little bit of power from ESL because everyone's got to have their shit together. And suddenly those fights and those battles and those dates, actually, you know what? Fuck it. No, I'll clash with you. I will clash with you. I'm going to have my event, and when I want, I'm going to tell Valve that's when we're doing it. No more quiet backroom negotiations. No, we're doing it then. In fact, we're going first. Boom. There's our dates. Fuck you. So that was great. Then it goes on to say, as Valve previously announced, tournament operators will be required to publish comprehensive information on how they compensate teams for attending their events. This includes any guaranteed payments for appearances, media rights, and other revenue shares. So now, on top of everything, we also need total transparency. Who's getting paid what? By who? How much entanglement, as Valve call it, is there? And do you know what this means, guys? It means that if that esports World Cup event, that isn't happening now, if that esports World Cup event wants to be recognised and licensed by Valve, which please don't do it, but if they do, they are going to have to say how much of a bag they are giving all of these teams. Looking forward for that dropping. Looking forward for, let's say, just as a flight of fancy, just a theory, imagine if some teams were getting paid more. Let's say some teams might be getting paid more because of affiliations, you know. Well, it would be there in black and white. Some people might take exception to that. Could be interesting. Let's see. So I'm into it. I'm into this change as well. I've always wanted financial transparency. You know, a lot of these companies are private companies, so they're under no obligation to disclose who they're paying. I mean, by the way, there was a period of time where in certain esports, teams were being paid appearance fees, and it wasn't being disclosed publicly. And it was the norm for those teams to ask for them, and you never heard about it. Then, in Section 5, Valve has also stressed their stance against exclusivity agreements, discriminatory treatment of teams, and potential conflicts of interests. Now, they did have, I did notice there was a specific line in the GitHub. This is the entirety of the competition and integrity segment. You can see here that the licensee undertakes not to engage in direct or indirect agreements with athletes or teams that would artificially restrict such athletes or teams' ability to take part in third-party events. This is interesting because this potentially means that these things that the TOs are putting on the table aren't enforceable from Valve's perspective. So, you know, for instance, they're saying if you participate in this, you can't participate in anything else. Well, actually, if you want to be licensed by Valve, you can't infringe anyone's participation at any event that they sanction. So, again, when you start thinking about that Kadia thing, is it even enforceable? Would Valve not pull the license just on principle? So you are going to get the right to say no. This is what I mean when I say there are going to be declines. People aren't going to go, nah, you can't strong arm me. Sorry. Daddy Valve will pull your fucking license. So that's great. Also, they do make a distinction of athletes and teams, which is important. I'll talk about why in a moment. We go on to the next clause. Any agreement between the licensee and teams or athletes needs to be non-discriminatory and identical for all teams or athletes. In particular, if licensee is going to share revenue or otherwise provide financial support, then such support must be equivalent for all rosters or otherwise determined by an objective KPI that is applied equally to all rosters, including rosters that have been directly invited, qualified, or entered through a wildcard invite determined before rosters are selected. So, in other words, if you have got an agreement with one team, that agreement has to be in place for all of the other teams. You cannot have haves and have-nots within your own little ecosystem. which again, if you think about how it has operated historically, how Blast had their partnered teams, and yet other teams would come in and supplement their tournaments, but they could never get enough points in the ratings to be invited back in a sustained fashion. If you think about the Louvre agreement teams, and then how we expand Pro League, so we got Louvre agreement teams in there, but non-Louvre agreement teams in there. Well, you know, like now none of that can happen. And this is the crucial part, the 5.3, potential conflict of interest. Licensee and tournament event staff may not have any business relationship, including but not limited to shared management, shared ownership of entities, licensing and loans, whether related to Valve games or otherwise, each an entanglement with any participating team or athletes unless approved by Valve. An entanglement is considered approved if A, it is disclosed to Valve in writing, and B, Valve has not objected within 90 days of the disclosure, provided that only disclosure after the effective date of the agreement shall trigger the 90 days period. Within its sole discretion, Valve reserves the right to A, require that licensee address and remove the entanglement within a reasonable period of time, not to exceed 2 weeks, or B, terminate the agreement without cost or penalty for Valve. An explicit or implicit approval by Valve should be valid for the duration of 1 year, starting on the date that Valve has received disclosure, unless explicitly otherwise scoped by Valve when granting the approval. The approval period shall thereafter auto-renew by the same time it was initially granted until terminated. So, there it is. And finally, we have codified I fought so long and hard, guys, on the battlefield of conflict of interest, and it's officially codified. Now, a lot can still go wrong here. Valve can just not give a fuck and not recognize any of the entanglements, but you will notice the distinctions it makes. It says any team or athlete, so I will draw you back to my video. The ESL Faceit group have a business relationship with Simple. They have never disclosed the details of it. Yet they have said they are partners with his Play Like Simple project. They promoted it. So I want to know the extent of that relationship now. Because Simple presumably wants to come back and play. He was just tweeting at Thorin during the Euro final saying, you know, he hopes to be back soon, but it's complicated. So, okay, I want him to play at the majors as well, but I need to know what kind of business relationship he's got with ESL Faceit, and ESL Faceit need to disclose that to Valve now. So, I don't know if they have, I don't know if they will, but they certainly should. And obviously, as well, we're back to our friends in Riyadh. The Esports World Cup, everyone is getting a stipend. In that club program, there's 30 teams. Some of these teams presumably will be playing at Valve-sanctioned, Valve-ranked events. They're going to have to come out and talk about what that entanglement means, who owns what. Because I guarantee it's not just the stipend, there'll have been investments. People will have bought equity or put money in. Now we get to know. And obviously, some of these orgs, I have no doubt, they will be tricksy and try and not fucking disclose it. Well, if you don't disclose it, now there's a chance you lose everything and you get removed from the fucking circuit. And also, it's not in perpetuity. Valve can come back after a year and revise it and say, actually, we decide that's bad now, so fuck you. So this is just like a stack of fucking W's. This is fucking super important for the scene that Valve have finally put something in place instead of that nebulous approach to a fucking conflict of interest, because the scene has been getting worse and worse and worse for that. We just keep letting it slide. Academy teams playing parent teams, crossover of sponsors, crossover of money, players owning shares in teams they then play against. It's a fucking nightmare. It is a nightmare. So, I'm looking forward to lots of fucking tears coming out from tournament operators and organizations and all these disclosures, which I'm hoping Valve will, of course, share publicly, because I believe they're all public interest stories. There's no reason, by the way, there's no reason for any of this to be a secret, right, in a sport. You know, I think I want to know who's paying who and who owns what and what the overlaps are. So, and as I said, I'm super interested to see how this impacts on the Esports World Cup in Riyadh and the club stipend program, which I'm pretty sure Valve must know. Internally, ESL basically did all of this. Well, the ESL cronies and the Louvre agreement teams, it's a totally separate venture. Don't think about it. They said, like, we're doing this Qiddiya esports club program. It's the ultimate fuck you to Valve, who've shut down our franchise leagues. This'll show them. Well, hopefully Valve get the fucking last laugh on that. So I'm kind of like looking forward to seeing the reality of how it pans out. Anyway, that's just a competitive integrity section. There's still a little bit more here. You can see the new requirements will offer an early look at the calendar of coming years on the heels of an already packed tournament schedule for 2025. A whopping 23 events are planned for the coming year after PGL, and StarLadder revealed plans to return to regularly hosting Counter-Strike events. So, look, as I said when I did my Blast breakdown, as I said when I talked about PGL coming back to the events, and obviously for disclosure, I will probably be working a lot of those PGL events, not just CS maybe, who knows. But the reality is now there is a calendar that gives you choice about where you go, what you attend, that we've got a genuine, healthy competition, and we've got Valve, instead of being an absentee landlord, they're there. They're actually curating and caring about the tournament and the circuit, which has been such a rarity historically. They have been very, very hands-off, I say to a fault. They could have stopped the Louvre agreement. They could have stopped the franchising. They could have stopped Blast. They could have stopped the hammering. They could have done all of this. They didn't. And they let the scene get to the franchise era of CS, which was fucking weak. It was piss weak. It was awful. Now, these things aren't possible from 2025 onwards. So let's enjoy the chaos of 2024 and then embrace the new world order of 2025 onwards. Now, there'll be some teething problems. I don't necessarily expect it to be perfect, a totally flawless transition. People are going to game the system. Everyone in esports is corrupt. Everyone in esports wants to milk as much as they can out of it. Nobody likes doing what they told, and everyone thinks they're the fucking Billy Big Bollocks and they're in charge. So yeah, there's going to be drama that comes out of this. There's going to be people trying to game the system, but ultimately, outside of some of the cons that I mentioned right at the start of breaking this down, I think in general we're going to have a much more regimented, predictable, stable scene and a tournament circuit where actually the teams that deserve to get the opportunity to succeed will, and the teams that don't will have to either work hard, get good, or fuck off. And that kind of makes it feel more real to me. That kind of makes it feel like a sport, finally. So I'm excited. As I said, I'll be watching a lot of this from the ground floor. I'm back. I got called slimy today on YouTube for working another major because I said in a video that 2021 was going to be my last major, not knowing, of course, that PGL would get awarded major, back-to-back majors, and invite me to the event. But I guess that means I'm a slimy, duplicitous person. So there you go. Who knew? But anyway, yes, we're back. We are back. We're so back.